What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another video, and today I have a Spright deck profile post-June ban list. So, one thing I will say, this deck has been super fun. I've been testing it a lot, and before I get into it, I want to apologize if I had to take a lot of breaths, or if you guys hear a lot of sniffling. Allergies have been terrible. It's been storming like crazy where I'm at. So, bear with me. I'm going to try and make it through this deck profile. And I will say this now, this is like a modified version of the first place list from the 250th YCS. So, it has some similar ratios, but I did change a few things here and there. And obviously it's also up to date for the ban list. So starting us off, we have 3 copies of Spright Blue. Obviously the best Spright card in the entire deck. All the Spright monsters have the same effect, where if you control a level or rank 2 monster, but not a link 2, just level or rank. If you control a level or rank 2 monster, you can special summon them from the hand. And then they all have effects when they're special summoned. And Blue's effect whenever he is special summoned is he adds another Spright monster from the deck to the hand. Next, we have 3 copies of Spright Jet. Spright Jet is your second best Spright monster, which is why we play 3 of each of these. Both of these help facilitate quite literally every single combo and help you find follow-up on the following turns. In Spright Jet's individual effect for whenever he's special summoned is to add a Spright spell or trap. That's why both of these are ran at 3. Use Blue searches Jet, Jet searches your spells and traps. And then I'm running 1 red and 1 carrot. These are basically standard Spright ratios for, people playing Spright. And, Spright Red's effect is a tribute another level, rank, or link to monster you control to negate a monster effect. And it has a condition, tribute to one other. Then if you tribute a rank or link to activate it, you destroy it. And then Carrot is the same for spells and traps, I believe. Yeah, Carrot is the same for spells and traps, where if you tribute a rank or a link to for its effect, you destroy it. So both of them are negates. Red is monsters. Carrot, or as I like to call Carrot, Cranberry, because she is more of a cranberry red than the carrot color. She is, or both of these are mainly only one-ofs because you only need them for a single turn. Next, we're on the only card in Spright that actually got hit on the list. 2 copies of Spright Starter. Starter summons a Spright, or special summons a Spright monster from the deck, and then you take damage equal to its original attack. And for the rest of the turn, you can't summon monsters except for level, rank, or link 2 monsters. And you can only activate 1 of it per turn, but that's not too bad. Next, I'm on 2 copies of Spright Smashers. You could argue playing 1 Smashers for an additional other card. Their normal trap is actually not terrible. I just chose to play 2 Smashers over playing 1 of the normal trap. And the reason why is because you banish a Therion, or a Springin's Therion or Spright monster, and then you apply one of the following effects for whatever you banish. Or no, and then you activate one of the effects, which is special summon a Springin's from the deck, summon a Therion from the graveyard, or banish a level, rank, or link 2 monster you control and a card your opponent controls. So, it is you banish 2 of your own cards to banish one of your opponent's, but that doesn't really mean much in the long run. And then I'm on 1 copy of Gamma Burst, because Gamma Burst is the way you're pushing for game. When you activate it, it gives all of your level, rank, and link 2 monsters 1400 attack, and you can, during the main phase, banish it to give something else an additional 1400 attack. And that is it for the Spright cards I am currently running in the main deck. Not a whole lot. Like I said, I did change a little bit from that first place list. And this deck has actually been fairly consistent. And then we get into the more engine part of the deck, the engines of the deck, which we have the Melfi engine as 1 caddy and 1 penny. This is how you're making Herald of the Arclight on your opponent's turn. And you can also grab follow-up by using caddy, by grabbing one of your 3 copies of Nimble Beaver. However, I will say, normal summon Nimble Beaver is full combo. So we're on 3 copies of Beaver to help see it very often. And then, and the reason why Beaver is full combo is because when Beaver is normal summoned, he special summons a level 3 or lower Nimble monster from the deck or graveyard. So you can also use them as an extender. Then we're on 2 copies of Nimble Angler, because this is the card that you're wanting to Foolish Burial off of your Sprind. This card, whenever it's sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, summons 2 level 3 or lower Nimble monsters from your deck. So typically, when you normal summon Beaver, you're going through all 3 copies of Beaver. But there are some cases where you don't go through all 3 copies of Beaver. And then finally, for the engine monsters, I'm on 3 copies of Swap Frog. This is to help facilitate making Toad, and it's actually a fairly good card. If you see this plus Angler in your hand, you basically have the same end board as normal summon Beaver. Granted, it's 2 cards rather than just 1, but the board is still fairly strong. And then for the generic spell cards we are on Double Crossout, 1 Called By, 1 Monster Reborn. Just because this is my typical ratio for Crossout Called By. I was on 3 Crossout, and if you still want to play the 3rd Crossout, you could definitely cut out Monster Reborn. I've not had Monster Reborn come up at all during testing. It only really came up if I wanted to overextend into a Toad. And at that point, you don't really need it, so that is why you could definitely get rid of the Reborn for the 3rd Crossout. And then we move on to the hand traps. And the hand traps I'm currently running in the main deck is 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Fairly self-explanatory card. Your opponent goes to touch the deck, you send her from your hand to the graveyard and tell them no, you're not allowed. And then, to back up the Ash, we are on 3 copies of Droll and Lock in the main, because Droll and Lock does what Ash Blossom does, but a lot more permanent for a turn. Then, I am on 3 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, because Ghost Ogre is still pretty good this format. And it's really good against Vanquished Soul, being able to hit the Link 1, or being able to hit any of the monsters that are activating their effects on the board, and get rid of them. Granted, you could force your opponent into tagging out, but if you hit the Link 1 specifically, they can't tag out using Vanquished Soul monster effects. And then I am also on the 1 copy of Nibiru in the main deck, just to have it there as a crossout target. And then finally, 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. And that is it for the main deck. It is a lot of hand traps, I will admit. But the amount of cards you have to play in Archetype are so small, or like it's so low, that it doesn't even affect the deck that much. Moving on to the extra deck, and then after the extra deck, we will hit the side deck. So starting us off in the extra deck, we have 1 copy of Spright Sprind. Spright Sprind, really good card. You just, this is part of your typical combo. And what does it do? Well, when it's linked, it can't be used as material to turn its summon. And when you link summon it, it can Foolish Burial at level 2 from your deck to the graveyard. Very, very important because, like I said, you make this, you send Angler. Angler summons 2 from deck, and then you make Gigantic. And then Sprint also has an effect that when your opponent summons a monster, you can detach a material from a Xyz monster you control to return that monster back to the hand. So if your opponent Xyz summons their 1 copy of Arise Heart, while you have the Sprint on the board, you can simply detach the remaining material off of your Gigantic Spright, or you can detach a material off of another Xyz monster you control that still has material in order to put that Arise Heart back in the X deck and get rid of the 3 material that were on that Arise Heart. Next, we are on 1 copy of Bujinki Ahashima. I will admit this card does need reprinted because it's starting to get up there in price. It's about an $8, $9 card, which is a little insane if you think about it. What does it do? Well, whenever it's link summoned, you can special summon special summon 2 monsters with the same level, 1 from your hand and 1 from your graveyard, and then immediately Xyz summon after you summon both. The effects of the monsters you summon are negated, so but that doesn't really matter because you're Xyz summoning with them at the point of resolution for this effect. Then I'm on 1 copy of IP Masquerena. IP self-explanatory because what do you do with the IP? You make the white woman jump scare. If you have the resources to go into Masquerena on your first turn, being able to white woman jump scare and get rid of an Arise Heart would be fairly amazing. And that is actually it for the Link monsters I am currently running. Because next I'm running 2 copies of Gigantic Spright. Gigantic Spright, this card needs to go to 1 or 0. This card is broken. Gigantic Spright gives you essentially protection from Nibiru. Because you can detach a material to summon a level 2 from the deck. And then both players are locked into level, rank, and link 2 monsters. Give me just a second. Sorry about that. So Gigantic Spright has the ability to, like I said, you detach a material from it, special summon a level 2 monster from the deck, and then both players are locked into level, rank, and link 2 monsters. The reason why it's important to note that it's both players is because that essentially gives you protection from Nibiru. I'm not sure if Nibiru can still be activated and just doesn't summon. I'm pretty sure it can still be activated and just doesn't summon, but it tributes off the entire board, which is unfortunate, but that's why we still play the one of Nibiru as a cross-out target. And then you can also use a link 2 monster as material for the summon of Gigantic Spright, and it doubles the original attack of Gigantic when you do so. And then I'm on 1 copy of number 2, Ninja Shadow Mosquito. This card really isn't summoned at all, if I'm going to be honest, but it's in here as an option because it can basically mind control an entire board if not kept in check. Well, I say an entire board. It can mind control like 2 monsters, depending on how many material you slap on this thing. Why can I not straighten this out? That's probably about as straightened out as I'm going to be able to get this. Then I'm on number 45, Chromologos. It's a pretty slow negate, but it can detach a material, target a card on the board. Or target a face-up card on the board, and then while Chromologos is on the board, that the card's effects are negated. And then and then it prevents your opponent from using cards with the same name. And then the boy that I talked about earlier, 1 copy of Toad, because Toad is just a free Omni Negate that steals the card from your opponent. I'm on 1 copy of Mannequin Cat because Mannequin Cat can help facilitate other plays, such as summoning monsters. Then we're on 1 copy of Melfi of the Forest because it searches out your Melfi Caddy in order to be able to, as I said earlier, make Herald of the Arclight. We are on number 65, Djinn Buster, which anybody that looks to make this deck, I highly, highly, highly recommend waiting until Djinn Buster gets the reprint in Monstrous Revenge, because this card is like a $5 rare, and it's not worth it. Then we're on 1 copy of Downward Magician, and 1 copy of Zeus for long game grind. And then finally, the 1 copy of Herald of the Arclight to round out the extra deck. Next, we move on to the side deck, and I have a couple of cards in the side deck I want to change out, but I didn't have the time before making this video, because I also just didn't have the cards for it. Next, so starting us off, we're on a 2nd copy of Spright Red in the side deck. This is 1 card I kind of want to take out of the side deck, but I had it in here for siding into longer games and more, negate reliant matchups. Then I'm on 3 copies of Fallen of Argyros. Yeah, Fallen of Argyros. Fallen of Argyros is a weird one. It's basically a Spright card, but the reason why I say it's a weird one is because you can summon it to either player's board. Any link monster that points to it cannot activate its effects, and then it has a quick effect on your opponent's turn to be able to detach 1 or 2 materials from an Xyz monster. So giving this to your opponent lets them interrupt you at a certain point, unless, you wait to summon it until after you've done all your stuff. But even at that, it's kind of weird. It's actually pretty good against Kashtira, though, because all you have to do is summon this thing to your opponent's side of the board, and what is Kashtira really doing without the continuous spell, which obviously you have plenty of interruption to stop the continuous spell from happening anyways. So, I don't know, it's a weird one. It's mainly here for the Kashtira matchup. And then I'm on 3 copies of Effect Veiler, and my remaining 2 copies of Nibiru are over here in the side deck as well. Then we are on 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More in the side deck for, going against Kashtira and Kashtira, Super Heavy, you name it. This is for trying to help us break through those big combo boards when going second. Then we're also on 2 copies of Lightning Storm and 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster. I feel like Lightning Storm going to 2 was a bit of a weird one, because if you look at a lot of lists, they weren't really playing Lightning Storm because there's not really a whole lot of reason to play Lightning Storm. But with that being said, I will be right back in just a moment once I fully sort out these decks. Alright guys, so if you did enjoy this deck profile, please be sure to hit that like button down below. Share this deck around. This deck was pretty cheap when I started picking up the cards for it. I was missing a few cards for a long while. And then they finally showed up. This was a deck that I was talking about in a couple of other videos where I was like, I'm missing a few cards, but as soon as those cards come in, the profile would come out. And I'm sorry about missing last week, because last week would have been this deck profile regardless, but I had some stuff going on and I was taking last week off because I said, one, I've not been feeling great. I've been coughing a fuckload, and so on and so forth. So without further ado, without further delay, I'm going to wrap up this video. Like I said, you guys let me know what you think about the list. It's essentially just, I changed a couple of things here and there. made it more up to date for the ban list. But this is the list from the 250th YCS over in Europe. And I hope you guys thoroughly enjoyed it, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.